Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a blue, white and red or Jeskai Control deck. It's your typical control deck with lots of cheap removal, counter spells and then mostly Planeswalkers as win conditions. So let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with Galvanic Bombardment, a nice cheap removal spell that gets better the more copies you've already cast or the more copies are already in your graveyard. We've got Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, great in a deck full of instants and sorceries, as he can transform quickly into Telepath and Bound that can control the board and give us card advantage. Thing in the Ice is an early blocker that also is a nice win condition. Once we remove all of the ice counters, we get an Awoken Horror, which bounces non-horror creatures and gives us a nice 7-8 to close out the game with. Then 2 copies of Telling Time, which is a nice card in a deck full of counterspells, so that if you don't have to use your counterspell on the opponent's turn and you still have a Telling Time in hand, you can still spend your mana in a useful way. This one gives you some card selection and also combines with cards like Evolving Wilds, which can shuffle your deck if you don't want to draw into the card that you left on top with Telling Time. So there's some neat tricks you can do. Then Harnessed Lightning, a nice addition from Kaladesh. Instant speed removal spell that works with energy, and we have a few cards in the deck that make energy, so Harnessed Lightning is a nice way to spend that excess energy to deal with large creatures, and if the creature we're trying to kill is less than 3 toughness, we get to save up some energy for subsequent Harnessed Lightnings. 1 copy of Declaration in Stone to have a removal spell that can exile opposing creatures, also works nicely against tokens. I don't love the card in a control deck since you're giving the opponent a card back in the form of a clue token most of the time, but it's still nice to have a card that exiles to prevent graveyard recursion or maybe indestructible creatures. 1 copy of Skywhaler's Shot, which is nice against larger creatures and also lets us scry 1, also an instant and only single white, so goes nicely into a 3-color deck. Then our counter spells, 2 copies of Scatter to the Winds, which we can also awaken, and then 3 copies of Broken Concentration. The Madness is probably never gonna come up unless we have a Jace, Vryn's Prodigy in play. Then 2 sweepers in Radiant Flames, which we can converge for 3, so deals 3 damage to each creature, which conveniently doesn't kill our Thing in the Ice. Then Glimmer of Genius, very important in the deck, gives us another instant that we can play if we don't have to use one of our counterspells, gives us some card selection and card advantage, and gives us some energy to go with our Aether Hubs and Harnessed Lightnings. Then some of our win conditions here. Gideon, ally of Zendikar, can win the game by himself sometimes, can make tokens, can turn into a 5-5. Probably not gonna make a lot of emblems in this deck, but still a great card. Another new addition in Chandra, Torch of Defiance, which can make us some mana, can provide some card advantage or deal damage to the opponent, maybe take out some Planeswalkers with the +1, can also deal with creatures with the minus, and then the emblem can also close out the game very quickly. We've got Nahiri the Harbinger, which also provides some card selection, can deal with enchantments, which otherwise is a big problem for the deck. Cards like Sphinx's Tutelage are a problem if we don't get to counter it. And then the ultimate is actually quite nice in this deck since we do have the blue Gearhulk, which we can get with Nahiri, and then when he returns back to our hand we get to replay him to get the Enter the Battlefield ability once again. So actually not a bad thing that he gets returned to our hand. Then Archangel Avacyn, another nice card since she has flash, so works well with our instants and counterspells, and then also just a great creature for vigilance, can also close out the game quickly. Don't have a lot of other creatures, but she might end up transforming, and then we get a 6-5 that deals 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. Then Disciple of the Ring, which is great in a deck full of instants and sorceries, since once we can play her with a few spare mana, we can start countering the opponent's spells, controlling the board by tapping and untapping creatures, and making the Disciple larger. Another sweeper in Planar Outburst, Also nice with Awaken to make a hasty 4/4 creature which can make a big difference. Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, can also provide some card advantage and bounce opposing creatures. Also have a Linvala to try and gain us some life back if we're behind against aggressive decks. Can also make a 3/3 Angel if we're behind on board, if the opponent has a lot more creatures in play. So just a nice card when you're behind, and if you're ahead, it's still a 5/5 flyer, which can also help close out the game. Then I've already mentioned Torrential Gearhulk, but it's an excellent card in this deck. Is a flash creature to play with our counterspells, can flash back a card from the graveyard essentially, and most of the time that's going to be something like a Glimmer of Genius to draw us 2 more cards, but can also flash back removal spells or counterspells. So just an excellent card in the deck, and also of course plays with Nahiri. And then finally Chandra, Flamecaller, which is another sweeper effect with the minus. Can also pressure Planeswalkers or just the opponent's life total with the +1. And if our hand is really terrible, we can also use the 0 ability, but I don't use that ability very often, to be honest. Then we get to our mana base, where we've got 2 plains, 3 islands, then 3 mountains, 2 Wandering Fumarole, which can also turn into a nice 1/4 or 4/1 creature. Needle Spires, which can turn into a 2/1 double striking creature. So these 2 creature lands are nice to pressure Planeswalkers with from the opponent. Otherwise we might have some trouble with Planeswalkers since we don't run a lot of creatures. Then 2 copies of Prairie Stream, which works nicely with Clifftop Retreat, as well as Sulfur Falls and Glacial Fortress, which will all come into play untapped if we have a Prairie Stream in play. And then Aether Hub to go with the energy theme, and since we usually have some spare energy, it can basically tap for any color, but we don't really want to draw multiple copies because we might run out of energy and not be able to cast all our colored spells. And then 4 Evolving Wilds, which is very important in a 3-color deck. So that's a deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks pretty good here. I've got all our colors, as well as a decent curve, so can't complain. We will have to decide what to get with Evolving Wilds here. So probably gonna get a Plains. Does mean that if we want to play these 2 tap lands, we won't be playing Thing in the Ice on turn 2, but Island changes that. So I think we still go with a Fumarole tapped since we have more early red cards than white cards. And then next turn we can decide if we want to play Thing in the Ice into keep up Broken Concentration, or if we want to first maybe play the Evolving Wilds before committing the Thing in the Ice. Depends what our opponent is playing here. Alright, so it looks like they are on Esper color, so they might be a control deck. Alright, Needle Spires, I think, let's see. So the opponent might have a counterspell up next turn. Question is, do we run out the Thing in the Ice right now? Don't hate it, but that does mean that we don't get to perhaps have the Glimmer available on turn 4 if we also want to keep up the Broken Concentration next turn. I kind of still like playing out the Thing in the Ice, since the opponent might have to spend a turn using a removal spell on it. And it's better to get it down before the opponent has counterspells up. But they can probably still kill it relatively easily with a Grasp of Darkness, or maybe a Murder. Opponent plays Shambling Vent, so they won't have the double blue for a counterspell here. And Aether Hub is a nice draw, since now we get to, I think, play the Aether Hub instead of the island in case we need access to white mana next turn. And then keep up our Broken Concentration, and then next turn keep up Glimmer of Genius as well. So if the opponent has a relevant 4-drop here, perhaps a Gideon, we get to counter it. And if not, then we won't be able to spend our mana this turn, but next turn we will have the Glimmer of Genius. Alright, so the opponent isn't doing anything, that's fine. This comes into play tapped, unfortunately, but yeah, let's just play out the island and say go. And then next turn we can start playing some of these tap lands. So end of turn, opponent is gonna murder the thing in the ice, and we could fight over it by using the Broken Concentration. But I don't think that's worth it, since we might need to use it on this turn. And the opponent has a lot of removal spells probably for the thing in the ice regardless. I don't think I want either of these, so put them both on the bottom. Draw into removal spells, which we don't really need against the control deck, but I guess another thing in the ice is not bad. Problem is that we don't get to play it here, since then we don't get to keep up the Broken Concentration as well. So I think we'll just play out a tapped Needle Spires and keep up our Broken Concentration for now. And then next turn we can re-evaluate. Opponent still not doing anything. Alright, another counterspell is not bad, so let's see. I think now we want to play the Evolving Wilds, since that can get either a Plains or a Mountain, so that the Clifftop Retreat comes into play untapped next turn. And then here we get to play Thing in the Ice and keep up a counterspell. And this time I'm not sure if we're gonna fight over a removal spell or not. The opponent still hasn't showed us double blue, so they might not be able to cast counterspells, or they might not play any counterspells, who knows. Alright, there's double blue. But the thing in the ice has already resolved. And here I think, let's see, we do have a Linvala in hand. So yeah, I think we go with white mana here. Alright, a Jace is also decent. So it's kind of a staring contest with the opponent at this point. We could try and resolve Jace, but then we don't get to keep up a counter, so I think we just play a land and say go. Try and draw into one more land so that we can play Jace and have a counter up. Yeah, that seems fine. So the opponent's not making any move. So we just need to hopefully draw into a land here. Nope, instead another counterspell. So that's a little awkward, but yeah, I think we have to still say go here, since things could go pretty poorly for us if we do try and cast a Jace. So the opponent trying to Grip of the Royal or Thing in the Ice just to draw a card. I think that's fine. Don't need to fight over it. So we have a lot of counters here, which is good in a control mirror. Also have 2 creature lands. Opponent with a Declaration in Stone now on our Thing in the Ice. I think we can let that happen. And then sacrifice a clue end of turn. Keep up blue mana. Alright, that's not a land. And that's also not a land, that's a little awkward here. So we could still try and tap out for something here. Maybe make our opponent use one of their counter spells. And then if the opponent does resolve something scary, like a Planeswalker, we can still pressure it with our creature lands, as well as use removal spells on potential tokens. So I think it's fine to maybe try and go for the Linvala, since that one I don't mind getting countered as much as the Jace. And then I guess leave up red mana for our bombardment. So let's see what the opponent wants to do about this. Alright, they're using a counterspell, that's good. That's one less counterspell to worry about. Now, just have to hope that the opponent doesn't resolve anything too scary on the other side. And here I think Radiant Flames is the less important of our removal spells, since Esper usually doesn't play lots of tokens. So let's see what the opponent wants to resolve here. If it's something like a Gideon, we can Galvanic Bombardment the token and then attack with one of our creature lands. Instead it's a Rise from the Tides, and we just discarded our sweeper, so that's a little annoying here, not gonna lie. But I guess we can start by killing one of the zombies, so that's not a card I expected from the opponent. But I guess it's not the end of the world. So we get to play Jace if we want to, and use Harness Lightning. But I think I prefer saying go here for a turn, and then use Harness Lightning end of turn. And then next turn play Jace and have a counter up. And the Jace can also bounce one of the zombie tokens. Alright, so the question here is, do we want to Harness Lightning right now? And I think it's probably fine. I don't think our opponent's gonna play 2 spells we need to counter here, and this prevents 2 damage. And activating a creature land to block is a bit too risky. Alright, so opponent does nothing, we get to untap. So let's see, if our opponent has a counter for our Jace, then if we want to fight over it with our counterspell, bounce a zombie, then our opponent can kill our Jace with a Shambling Vent and a zombie, so that's not actually that great for us. So I think, I'm afraid we have to still say go here, and then maybe force something with a creature land plus a counterspell, since now we have enough lands to work with. Yeah, that might be fine. And then next turn go for the Jace. Still nothing end of turn from the opponent, that's good. So if the zombies attack, I think I will activate the Fumarole here. Although I guess the Needle Spires might be slightly better, since that will actually kill the zombie without us having to make a move. And then keep up as much blue mana as possible. Alright, this seems good. And then we'll see what the opponent wants to do about it. Grip of the Royal. I think I actually want to counter this. Again, if our opponent has something like a Gideon, we can still pressure it with our Fumarole. Alright, so we get to kill one of the zombies. Take 2. That's good. Let's see what their follow-up is. Declaration in Stone on our land, that's fine. And then I think, let's see, we have enough red. It's either a plains or another island here. I think I'll go with the island since we have so many double blue cards in hand. Alright, Radiant Flames in case our opponent has a second Rise from the Tides. So yeah, I think it's time to deploy the Jace and leave up as much blue mana as possible. Alright, this looks good. And the question here is, do we plus or do we bounce the zombie? I think bouncing the zombie is fine here. And say go. If our opponent has something like an Anguished Unmaking, I guess we can counter that. Might have been a reason to plus first with the Jace to at least get a card out of it. Alright, Shambling Vent getting activated. That's fine. Don't have a removal spell for it quite yet. But Jace is not gonna die, and then next turn we can potentially block with a Fumarole. And end of turn, sacrifice a clue. Alright, there's an answer to the Shambling Vent. Land is not bad actually. This one I'll put on the bottom. Alright, do we need the extra land this turn? We might. I think I'll play the untapped one here and say go. Just try and get as much card advantage out of this Jace as possible. Keep up our counters for the opponent's threats and hope that's good enough. And we still have a lot of Planeswalkers that we can draw into. Still have our Gearhulk. So we have definitely some good draws left. Alright, another Rise from the Tides from the opponent, but we do have a Radiant Flames for it, so I actually don't feel compelled to use a counterspell on it, even though we could. Because this counterspell might trade for something like a Planeswalker, whereas a Radiant Flames might not trade with anything. And there's a Telling Time. So let's Radiant Flames here. I guess we can plus first with the Jace. Yeah, I'll keep that on top. Radiant Flames for, I guess 2 is enough. But I don't see a reason not to go for 3 here. Play our Evolving Wilds and say go. Still have 2 counterspells up. And Telling Time and Glimmer end of turn. So in a decent spot. Opponent with their own Jace. Alright, so this one I don't mind countering. And I think I'll just go with the Broken Concentration since we have the Telling Time to spend our remaining mana with. So I don't really want to Awaken here. So first 1/2 Telling Time. And I guess I'll take another counter, but yeah, I guess we can actually draw into this other Telling Time. It's probably better than a random card. So I don't think I want to shuffle away the Telling Time. So let's just draw. Plus with Jace. I don't think we need more lands, but I guess we'll draw one anyways. And then say go. And pretty much do the same as last turn. Shambling Vent is gonna get frisky. And I think it's fine to use our Harness Lightning. But I'm gonna let it attack first so that it's tapped and the opponent can't float any mana. So let's Harness Lightning for 3. And end of turn, Telling Time first. And definitely taking the Gearhulk. And then we can shuffle away the mountain here. And then the question is, do we want to Glimmer? Or do we want to keep up a counter here in case our opponent has something like an Anguished Unmaking? I think it's fine to just untap and play it ultra safe. Put on bottom. Alright, Disciple of the Ring can certainly close out the game, but I think we can still say go. We have all these instant speed spells we can play. And we have the active Jace, so it's kind of on the opponent to make a move. I guess something like an Ulamog could be problematic, since it would still exile 2 permanents, but we could still counter it. So here, let's Glimmer, see what the opponent does. Letting it resolve. Jace is fine, but we already have a Jace in play, so I don't think we need it. So put both on the bottom, draw into more. So I think playing the Glimmer here is fine, and here we do get to keep up a counter. Put both on the bottom. Alright, untap. Draw some more cards. Yep, I'll put that on top. And let's see. I guess we still just say go here. And then the plan is to Torrential Gearhulk end of turn. And I think we might as well discard the planes here, as well as a Skywhaler shot. End of turn Gearhulk. 2 counters to fight over it, but the opponent doesn't want to. And yeah, let's just get another Glimmer here. I'll take the Avacyn. And alright, we have a declaration for a potential indestructible creature. Get our last few lands out of the way. And I guess we might as well play out the Avacyn here. Don't really see what could go wrong at instant speed here. Maybe the opponent has their own Gearhulk, but that's not the end of the world. Avacyn resolves. And now we get to start beating down. Could also play the Chandra here. Have to watch out that we don't deck ourselves. Put Jace on the bottom. Alright. Let's see. 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. So we don't get to keep up all 3 counterspells. So I don't think I want to commit the Chandra. We're already way ahead on board. So let's see what happens. Alright. Just gonna say go here. No need to make a move. Discard the bombardment. And does the opponent have Ulamog? Nope, but they do have Planar Outburst with Awaken, but we can simply counter that one. And I guess we'll awaken our own Scatter since the opponent now tapped out. And I guess we'll awaken an Aether Hub. And now that our opponent's tapped out, the creatures in play plus a creature land will be more than enough to close out the game. Alright, Chandra, I guess we'll just play this one. Still have plenty of counters up. Alright. So it took us a while, but we were certainly in control of the game. And this is gonna do it. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks certainly acceptable. And what land do we lead with is an interesting question, and I think it's going to be a mountain, so that both of these come into play untapped. And turn 2 we will have to decide if we want to commit a Thing in the Ice or not. And we probably do want to play it out. Alright, interesting. Minister of Inquiries from the opponent. So they might be on a mill deck, or they could just be an energy deck. Who knows? But here I don't mind playing out a Thing in the Ice. Next turn we can go Plains into Telling Time, and then the Prairie Stream comes into play untapped. So we have double blue. Alright, blue-red, they have their own Thing in the Ice, so now we have to try and find an answer to that. Alright, so we drew up an island, which is actually not bad, but I think I still play the plains here, since if we draw a Gideon, we want to have double white. And say go. And when playing the Telling Time, I guess we need to keep up a red mana, in case we want a Galvanic Bombardment. Well, opponent put one in the graveyard for us, so now future Galvanic Bombardments are going to be better. End of turn Telling Time, keep up red. And alright, there's a Gideon. I guess I'll take it. And there's also Galvanic Bombardment, which I guess we'll keep on top. Opponent could mill us here, but I don't think they should. And opponent isn't representing any counterspells. It's pretty unlikely that they transform their Thing in the Ice. So I think we just jam this Gideon and try and apply some pressure. And I think making a token makes the most sense here. And hope our opponent can't transform their Thing in the Ice out of nowhere. Opponent mills us. I wouldn't mind our opponent milling another Galvanic Bombardment, since then this one could just kill the Thing in the Ice. So the opponent might be on a Sphinx's Tutelage deck here, if they're actively trying to mill us. But they're not playing anything, so far so good. And there's a Planar Outburst, which is an answer to Thing in the Ice, but would also kill our own Thing in the Ice, so not really. Let's just play the Clifftop Retreat, turn Gideon into a 5/5, and attack. And could also attack with a token here. I guess we will, since then Galvanic Bombardment can finish off the Thing in the Ice if it blocks. Opponent does block. And yeah, let's try and Galvanic this. Opponent uses a Scatter to the Winds, that's fine. Cascade is gonna tap down our ally token next turn, that's still fine. End of turn Glimmer. Let's see if the opponent has a response, maybe a way to kill our Thing in the Ice. Doesn't look like it. Alright, I'll take the Broken Concentration, and Linvala is actually not bad either. It's not an answer to the opponent's Thing in the Ice, so maybe we just take the Broken Concentration here. We already have Gideon for pressure, so I think a way we lose this game is the opponent flipping their Thing in the Ice and then killing Gideon. So in that case, let's just plus Gideon once again. And attack. And we could have Radiant Flames here just to transform our Thing in the Ice, which would have been reasonable. But there's also ways that could have backfired. Would also be killing our own Night token, but I guess that would happen regardless if we transform the Thing in the Ice. So I guess we can go for it now. Play Radiant Flames, the Thing will transform before the damage gets dealt, so burn spells are not gonna kill our Thing in the Ice here. And now we also get to keep up the Broken Concentration. If we play this island, that is. Yeah, let's go for it. I want to do this before activating Gideon, otherwise we would bounce our own Gideon to our hand. Alright, opponent with a Torrential Gearhulk, which is not going to resolve. Would have cast a Scatter to the Winds. And then the transformation would have bounced the Gearhulk back to our opponent's hand. So that would have been no good. So it doesn't bounce the opponent's Thing in the Ice because it's also a horror. But the opponent's Thing in the Ice is only on 3 ice counters. So pretty far away from transforming. Get to plus Gideon, attack for 12. And we still have a Planar Outburst that we can awaken at some point. I guess we didn't even have to Radiant Flames for 3, so we might have as well have played the Evolving Wilds here, so we had more mana next turn. But it's probably not gonna matter here. So is there a reason to Outburst here? Nope. So let's just plus. Attack with both. And see if the opponent has any removal spells. Alright, turn 4 Gideon. Steals another win. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which has some powerful cards in it for sure, but it's a little awkward with these 2 tap lands and all these expensive cards, so I think we can do better. Alright, this is slightly better. We've got 1 more land. Got Radiant Flames if we're up against an aggressive deck, even though we're missing white mana for the full Converge. And any land lets us cast a Glimmer of Genius, which helps us get to our 5 and 6 drops. Alright, Gideon with no white mana. It's gonna be a little late to the party when we do cast him, probably. Alright, double black, but no play. Never mind, an Olivia's Dragoon. So the opponent on a vampire deck. Alright, Evolving Wilds is a nice one, so we get to grab our planes. Be a little closer to casting Gideon, and next turn Radiant Flames for 3 is gonna be a lot better than just for 2 here. Let's see what the opponent does. So we did not get Madness here by the Incorrigible Youths, which is good. Opponents might be on a mono black version, perhaps not even playing red, as they play Scrap Heap Scrounger. So might also have some artifact synergies going on. And yeah, I think we just Radiant Flames here. Don't see a reason to wait, since we want to be casting the Glimmer next turn. And this prevents us a lot of damage. Evolving Wilds from the opponent, so I imagine that's going to get a red source. Alright, there we go. So the opponent is playing red after all. So cards we can expect are things like Unlicensed Disintegration, which is a staple in the red-black aggressive decks. And here we drew Needle Spires, which is interesting. So if we play this, then next turn we have access to Gideon, or we could just go Island and play the Glimmer. I kind of like Glimmer more here, since might just find us an untapped white source, and we kind of do want to get up to our expensive cards like Linvala. So yeah, let's just keep up Glimmer here. I guess a turn 6 Gideon is still fine. So the opponent does get back the scrap heap end of turn by exiling a creature from their graveyard, which is not bad. And hit us for 3, down to 15. And they have a Bloodhall Priest, which is a good one. So this is where we want to draw into our untapped white source for Planar Outburst. Alright, I guess I'll take a Harness Lightning. Thing in the Ice is not bad either, since we could go Thing plus Harness Lightning, make our opponent spend a turn maybe using a removal spell, since it can just block the scrap heap. So yeah, I'll take the Thing in the Ice as well. It's actually not a bad turn, since thanks to the 2 energy we got from Glimmer, we get to use the Harnessed on the Bloodhall Priest. I guess we could wait. There's probably not too many things that can go wrong by waiting, since the opponent might present a bigger threat. They might play an enchantment on their creature, who knows. But yeah, let's just play the Thing and keep up Harness Lightning. And the opponent with 3 cards in hand, it's not very likely that they get to empty it when they attack with the Bloodhall Priest. And if they do, we can still play the Harness Lightning before that happens. Opponent does go to combat. And I guess a corner case where we should have used the Harness Lightning before the opponent enters combat is Build to Smash, which can only be used on attacking creatures. Since now the Bloodhall Priest is attacking, if I used it a little sooner, then the Bloodhall Priest would not have been attacking. But I guess we'll find out if the opponent does have Build to Smash right now. Right, they do not, that's good. So we get to deal 4. The opponent can't respond once we are selecting the amount of energy we want to use. And here, opponent might have burn spells, who knows, but I'm gonna block, don't want to take 3 damage. And another Bloodhall Priest, that's fine. Alright, Galvanic Bombardment is an answer to the scrap heap, but the opponent might get it back next turn. But I guess playing Gideon, making a token is fine. Could also go Disciple, but that's better once we have more mana, so we can protect it from an unlicensed disintegration. Could also Planar Outburst at some point, but we still have this Thing in the Ice that could transform. So I'm gonna give our Thing in the Ice a couple more turns before we Planar Outburst, if we really don't find an answer to the Bloodhall Priest. Could also just block with the token and then use the Galvanic. So no reason to use a Galvanic right now. Let's just wait and see what happens. Since I imagine if our opponent does have a removal spell, they're more tempted to use it on the Thing in the Ice than on the Knight token. So let's see if the opponent attacks Gideon here. Just a Bloodhall Priest attacking us. Alright, I'll block with a Knight token. Opponent with a Fiery Temper on Gideon. That's fine, can't do anything about that. Token deals damage, and now we can Galvanic. Priest down. Gideon is still alive. Declaration is not a bad answer to the scrap heap, since that will exile it forever. But I don't really see a reason to spend our time and energy on the scrap heap when we can just make some more tokens. Could also just plus Gideon and start attacking. Could also activate some of our creature lands, but a Grasp of Darkness would be pretty bad, since we need all of the mana with all these 6-drops. I guess using Declaration is not the end of the world, since it also removes a counter from the Thing in the Ice. The only downside is that the opponent gets to sack the clue right away, but I guess that's not the end of the world. Alright, fine. And I guess since we do have this thing about to transform, it's better to plus Gideon and get in for 5 rather than make a Knight token that's probably gonna die anyways. So we're basically looking for any cheap instant or sorcery that we can use to transform our Thing in the Ice. A land would also be good, so we get to cast our 6-drops and play Disciple and keep up 1 mana. Another Fiery Temper is gonna kill Gideon. But the opponent doesn't have an answer yet to our Thing in the Ice, and there we go. Telling Time is the perfect card, since that both will transform the Thing in the Ice, and it's probably also gonna find us a land here. Alright, I'll take... I guess we can't cast a Scatter here. So we could take the Evolving Wilds and sacrifice it if we're not interested in these 2 other cards, and I don't think we need to Scatter. Since we have all these other cards, I don't really mind if our Awoken Horror gets killed. And attack for 7. And this is going to get, I guess, a blue source, since we already have plenty of red. Alright, so in a decent position. Opponent at 8, they have nothing in play, and next turn we can drop this Chandra. Or perhaps a Disciple. Alright, so there's the Unlicensed Disintegration. Couldn't have countered that anyways, even if we took the Scatter, since we don't have double blue up. But that's fine, the opponent with no artifacts in place, so just murder, basically. But now we get to untap with Chandra. And with the opponent at 8, that's gonna be a pretty quick kill. And I think I like Chandra more than playing the Disciple, since now we're putting the opponent at 2, and then even if they do play a blocker, we can probably still kill the opponent. Alright, they're using a removal spell on one of our tokens, that's also fine. A plus next turn from Chandra is still enough. Could also activate one of our creature lands just to make sure. Alright, Kalitas, I guess that's not bad, but we can just Planar Outburst and then plus our Chandra. Could also play the Disciple and tap Kalitas, so lots of options. Could also awaken the Planar Outburst. I guess, let's see, if our opponent does have a removal spell, what's the way to beat that? I think playing Disciple we can just counter the removal spell. So I should probably play the Disciple, since that way we win for sure. Even though we don't get to get rid of the Kalitas. So let's tap this. Exile something we won't need. Plus Chandra. And now even a removal spell is not gonna do it. Alright, sweet, I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Happy holidays to everyone, and as always, have a nice day.